Hi, I'm Susie Larson. Thank you for listening to Susie Larson Live. Faith Radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. So thanks for giving, and thanks for sharing with a friend.
It's only just a matter of sing, so the back row is your glide. 'Cause walking just won't do dance. You don't have to know how to. Ever since God's got you.
Welcome to Susie Larson Live. Always so honored to get to spend this time with you. In fact, I look forward to bringing you conversations every single day that hopefully inspire you in your faith walk, that deepen your understanding of God's Word, and that heightens your awareness of His very real presence in your life. So what if you could identify some of the lies you believe about your finances? And what if you confronted them head on? What if you invited God into the center of your financial story and you allowed His Spirit to search your heart, to really confront your God-limiting beliefs, your self-limiting beliefs, and to put a fresh vision in your heart of what is possible? What if you no longer had to live paycheck to paycheck? And this is not the prosperity gospel, so to speak, where God is a means to an end. This truly is about aligning your life with the promises and purposes of God to the degree that you can steward your finances in a way that you can give away more money than you ever dreamed possible. Our friends Bob and Linda Lotich join us every month, and their book, it's amazing, Simple Money, Rich Life, Achieve True Financial Freedom and Design a Life of Eternal Impact. They join us every month to just give us a fresh faith perspective on finances. I liken them to Dr. Troy for the health. They are for our finances what Dr. Troy is for our health. And they've got an amazing podcast. I laugh and giggle every time I listen because Linda's so funny, but it's so practical too. And one of the things they talked about on a recent podcast episode, we'll link up their podcast in our show notes, is the surprising science behind celebrating small wins and how doing that actually can help make your financial dreams a reality. So we'll get them on in just a sec. A quick announcement. You've been hearing about this, but you're going to hear about it from me as well. True forgiveness brings healing, but it's also hard work and it takes time. And we would love to walk with you on that journey. And if you'd like to receive a daily text encouragement over the next 2 weeks, every day for the next couple of weeks, text the word forgive to 877-933-2484. Now, let me tell you about my guests. We'll get them on the show. For the last 14 years, award-winning blogger and podcaster Bob Lotich has been a trusted voice for Christians wanting to find financial freedom in the way God intended. He shared timeless wisdom and practical strategies with more than 50 million readers, listeners, and students through his Seed Time blog, online courses, and Seed Time Money podcast. He lives in Franklin, Tennessee with his wife, Linda, and their 3 children. You can find him at seedtime.com. Linda is co-founder of Seed Time and co-host of the Seed Time Money podcast. She's a fireball who helps you see things from a spouse's perspective and keeps all talks about money light and fun. Bob and Linda, welcome back to the show.
We are so glad to be here.
Yes.
Thank you again for having us, Susie.
Always look forward to our conversations. And you know this because you've been on enough times now. Every day I ask the same question, and it's more personal in nature, and it's just this. What has the Lord been speaking to you about these days as you spend time with Him? Linda, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I was just listening to you talking about unforgiveness and you guys walking people through that. And I got really excited about it because a few years ago, the Lord really changed my life in that area. And the whole idea of praying for your enemies was something that it was like it broke something off of me. And I mean, I'm just really excited about that. So I'm so glad that you're doing that. And that to me is one of the most powerful revelations you can get, instead of just being angry, but trying not to be by faith. There's actually so much more in that arena. And it's just really beautiful when you realize that something that maybe the enemy could be trying to keep you back with, you can actually find so much freedom in.
Yeah.
So good. Oh, so good. Somebody text me an amen. We're not even started yet, and here we are. All right. Love it so much. What do you say, Bob?
Yeah, I've been reading through the book of Acts, the early parts, really, just kind of hanging and meditating on them. And I think it was Acts 4 or 5. And the story of Ananias, I forget to say it, and Sapphira is just fascinating to me. Because I look at their story and I look at something that could be perceived as generous in that they sold their property and then gave a whole bunch of it away, but didn't give all of it because, they kind of lied and promised something and didn't deliver and all this. But like, for anybody who doesn't know the story, like they were struck dead. And it's like, it's such a, I don't know, it's a very potent reminder to me, of a bunch of things that I'm just kind of like processing through, and like in a little bit of the, fear of the Lord, and not a, like I'm scared of him, but in a respect and awe and honor, and just a whole bunch of things that I feel like the Lord's kind of, I don't know, teaching me through that tragic story, I guess, So there's a whole lot to unpack there, but I'll just let that there for now.
That's so good as well, Bob. And I wish I had time to search, but there's a proverb that says something like, "Cursed are those who boast in gifts they don't give." Something like that. Ooh. I'll have to search for it after the show. But, we have a desire to appear more spiritual than we are. And, Scripture talks about don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. And yet on the same note, it also says, let your light shine so that others may see your good deeds and praise the Father in heaven. And I wasn't planning on going here. I don't remember if we've talked about it before, but I have to say there's something about someone's testimony in giving. That's what reframed the model for us. Like we were, in the early years weren't tithers. Back and forth we were because of medical debt and fear. And then we brought in the tithe and the offering, and we felt glad about that. Like that was life-changing in the middle of tons of medical debt to go, no, this is a non-negotiable. And we saw God move. But it would be years before someone shattered that ceiling and said, I was going to give this gift to the building campaign and God told me to triple it or whatever. And we're like, that never even occurred to us. So it took testimonies to change the paradigm. So maybe I'd love for you both to speak to that, because on one hand, there are times when people are giving because they want a building with their name on it, and God knows the heart. But there are other times you do need to testify, because that begets more faith in the heart of the listener, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, to be honest, we really wrestled with for a long time, because we had, anybody knows some of our story, we've just had a lot of crazy financial miracles that are just 100% attributed to God, like where he just did something so magnificent in our financial life where our jaws are just dropped. Like, did that just happen? We've had so many of those moments, and we never told a soul. We didn't tell our best friends. We didn't tell our parents. Like, no one knew. And finally, it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago at this point, we had a moment in prayer where the Lord convicted us, or me specifically, and said, you are robbing me of the glory that I should be getting for this thing, because you are not testifying about what I've done in your financial life. And anyway, but my fear had always been, well, it's like, I don't want to, let my right hand know what my left hand's doing. And I don't, and anyway, and I think that the root of this, just like so many things, comes down to the heart posture. Like, are you saying this to get acclaim and a praise, or are you saying this to point glory back to the Lord so that he's the one who gets praise? And as, we stepped out in doing it, to the best of our ability with that right heart posture, it's been amazing. I mean, similar to what you're saying, Susie, the number of people who were inspired by that. And it's not inspired by Bob and Linda, it's inspired by what God has done. And it's like, we're just testifying to what he did, So I think there's so much power in it.
Anything you want to add, Linda? I agree so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add that, we didn't seek to share this, but we felt the conviction of the Lord. And I think part of it is because this is what we are called to do. And so I think there are appropriate times, and then there are also inappropriate times. Like, I don't meet someone for the first time and tell them oh, did you know we did this? Like, it's just inappropriate.
Perhaps you haven't heard of me.
But in the right context, and when someone is like drawing it out of you and looking and searching, it's so helpful to be able to have an answer. And isn't that in the Bible, to be able to have an answer for the hope that we have, And so,
how is it any different? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Linda. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, how is it any different from any other kind of wrestle when you wrestle in private? Because, when you pray in private, God says, who sees you in private will reward you publicly. Part of that to me is you're able, you comfort those with the comfort you receive. So when you're in an intimate conversation and they've been in a battle, say, well, let me tell you about a battle I was in. And let me tell you how God had me engage with him and grab hold of the promise. And let me tell you what God did. Our participation is part of the story, whether it's finances or it's health or it's a relationship or it's some demonic attack. Part of our testimony is that we were involved in it in some way. It was God gets the glory, but that's part of our story, right?
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would also add, I'm reading a book right now called Lead with Prayer, which is fantastic. Like one of my favorite books on prayer I've ever read.
It's great.
One of the reasons I like it so much is because they basically found like all these high performing Christian leaders, business owners or leaders in ministry, and they ask them, what are your prayer habits? Like, what do you do to have a really healthy prayer life? And so you get to pick the brain of Francis Chan or some of these like super large Christian CEOs, and you get to see what they're doing in their prayer life. And I'm finding it to be so inspiring, whereas there could be, maybe they felt sheepish about sharing it, like feeling like I'm bragging or boasting, but I'm finding it inspiring just to see, oh, that's what Francis Chan is doing in his prayer closet. It's like, that's why he's having this level of effectiveness, and it gives you something to model off of. And not that I just want to copy what everyone else is doing, but it provides such an inspiration that I just love it,
Yeah. Well, faith comes by hearing. And I just think there's something about one testimony begets another testimony. And I love what you're saying about heart posture. And I will just say for us, the people that had the courage and the guts to say, and in the right context, their financial story, it completely changed our perspective on what's possible. It just never even occurred to us when we were young, parents. And so I think this is such an important conversation to have. And for those who've missed our past conversations, go back and listen to Bob and Linda's backstory. But in a nutshell, there was financial brokenness in their 20s, and then God really got a hold of them. They started to apply biblical principles. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think you paid your mortgage off by age 30 and gave $1 million away by age 40. Is that right? Something like that?
Correct.
I should know that by now. Totally should know that by now. And so, and really, God has really called you guys up to be, I think, such incredible voices in this space, because there's no legalism in your heart. And there's, to me, it's not a one size fits all, in that you're always so sensitive to the context of a person's story. So with that said, right now on your podcast, you're doing, I think, a 40-week series on really how to move from bracing for impact, living paycheck to paycheck, to stewarding finances in a way that you too could possibly give away more than you ever dreamed possible. Thus far, what have been your favorite shows? And I'd love to hear from both of you, but Linda, I'll start with you first. Like, what have been, like, when you finish, you're like, I loved that show.
Oh, let me think. I think probably, I'm looking back to see if I can remember some of these. They're all unique in their own special way. And I think partly because they're our story, but I mean, really just the beginning of kind of doing an overview, which episode would that have been? But just
the first one,
just an overview of what God has walked us through, because
that's really
to
good.
me, it sounds like a movie script. Like, I could see this being a movie. And what I think is that most people have stories like that. It's just that they haven't taken the time to put the threads together the way we have. And we only did that because someone asked us to, and because we wrote a book. But it's just amazing looking at what God has done in our lives and what he is doing in other people's lives. So yeah, just seeing that, and it kind of makes sense, I think, of your calling and your purpose and the direction that you're headed. I think it gives you a little bit more sense of that. So yeah, that's probably my favorite one.
Cool.
What would you say,
How about you, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel the same way. Because the first episode was basically just breaking everything down, and then from there we're getting into more practical nuts and bolts. And just for anybody listening, like a high level of this series, it's a 40 episode series, is to somebody was asking, like, all right, essentially the pinnacle of it was we reached that goal of giving away $1 million by age 40, which is a long-standing goal that we had. And somebody was asking, if you had to start over and do it again, how would you do it? And so the design is, all right, how do we break this down to 40 parts of, if we had to start over, what are the most important things that we would do to reach that goal? Now, that's not everyone's goal. That's completely fine. Hopefully this is beneficial for anyone who wants to move forward in their finances, but that's kind of how we've broken it out. And so for me, it all starts with that original story, telling everything. And then from there, I don't know. I've enjoyed
Breaking
a lot
it down.
of them. But,
Yeah. I mean, the budget one is fun too. I really like talking about budgets because it's something that I never thought I would like. And
That's so funny.
It's like catches me by
I love
surprise,
that.
but I love a budget. I love it.
Wow. Okay, when we come back, that's so funny because I get such a kick out of listening to you laugh at yourself on these podcasts. You say something funny and then you laugh because I like to think I'm funny too sometimes, and then I laugh at myself. But anyway, and just the way you talked about your relationship to money, look at that. I mean, even God can do that, where He's changed your mind about budgets and how God paired you together with your respective strengths to make this ministry work. So on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about the surprising science behind celebrating small wins. How do we take baby steps? How do we set kind of marked goals? And what is the science behind celebrating your wins? If you've got questions, send them in. I'll try to weave them into the conversation. You can text 877-933-2484. And if you don't have questions, I've got one for you because I love interaction. I love it when you text the show. In a few words, how would you describe, maybe you wanted to make it like a book title. How would you describe your relationship with money? If you want to name it a book, do that. Except we've done that before. That's hilarious. But give me a few words. How would you describe your relationship with money? Text me 877-933-2484. We'll be back in a minute. I don't know about you, but I love consistent nourishment. I love to fast on occasion. There's a purpose in that. But if you go too long without eating on a regular basis because you're too busy, your body actually goes into crisis mode. Well, in the same way, your soul, your spirit, they need nourishment too. And that's why it's so important to be listening to scripture, listening to good teaching on a consistent basis throughout the day. That's why we're here. We love what we do, and we want to do it with you. If you listen on the radio, on the terrestrial signal, we encourage you, download our free Faith Radio app. That way, if you're traveling this season, you can take us with you wherever you go. You can catch the live shows or even the podcast after the fact, and we've made it easier than ever. All you have to do is text the word app to 877-933-2484 and then click the link. I hope you will walk with us on this journey. Greater things are yet to be done in and all around us because God, well, He's on the move. Hope you're having a really great day. We sure are. Thanks for tuning in to Susie Larson Live, talking to our friends Bob and Linda Lotich, who join us every month to talk about a faith perspective on our finances. I love these two. They've got a great podcast, which we'll link up in the show notes. We're drawing also from their book, Simple Money, Rich Life, Achieve True Financial Freedom and Design a Life of Eternal Impact. And what I love so much about their message is, again, it's not just about you amassing all this wealth for yourself. It's becoming a flow-through account where you, as you grow in your stewardship, you grow in your generosity, and you sow into the kingdom in massive ways. And it's just such a powerful message and perspective. So you did a podcast recently on the surprising science behind celebrating small wins. I'd love for you both to speak to it. And either one of you, since you're together, you can pick which one wants to go first.
Yeah, do you want to start?
No, you go ahead.
Well, yeah. So I think the gist of it is there's a lot of people, especially when working towards financial goals, that, and I'm speaking to myself. I'm someone who it's like, oh, there's this monster goal that's going to take us 5 years to reach, and I'm just going to put my head down and I'm just going to grind it out until I get there, and then maybe I'll celebrate once I reach that finish line. And I'm, a little bit driven and persistent, and so like I might be able to do that. But Linda, on the other hand, and people
I
like
need a little
her,
treat.
and like she needs. What did she say? Like you need those milestones to keep you motivated through it, right?
For sure. I mean, I just don't. When we walked through this together, I don't think I could have made it if there was no end in sight. And so that's why there had to be a stopping point every so often. And, we set these up for ourselves just because we both were trying to do this, but we both go at it completely different ways. And so I think that was kind of the challenge, but also the sweet spot for us of when we figured out how can this work for both of us, not just one of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Linda, you said this felt especially important because he was the one actually hands-on managing finances. So when you feel a little bit on the outside of the circle, you're paying the price as far as tightening the belt and everything, but you're not seeing the gains. And so talk about that, both of you, in the context of marriage. If there's one that's maybe better at it or just feels more called to it, is it okay that one spouse just is the one who manages it? First of all, this is sort of a little pivot, but I just want to, because we've had this question before. Just your thoughts on, should you be going back and forth, or is it okay if one's got the gifting? And then if so, how do you make that work so the other one doesn't feel outside the circle and kind of out of the loop?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about here, so we'll try and keep it
I
brief,
think it's really great. I think it makes a whole lot of sense to let the one who is naturally gifted, has the desire to take the lead.
Yeah.
But I think both should be connected and involved. I think that's just when it works best. Like, we've talked to a lot of married couples, and when they're not on the same page, like, everyone who's married understands this. Like, it's just not great. But when you can, get in unity on the thing, even if one spouse is moving slower than the other, the speedier one, slows down the pace so they can walk together. And I think the analogy that we used was a three-legged race. And it's like, once you get in sync, when you got your two legs tied together, like, you can move quickly, but it's like, you have to be in sync. Otherwise, you're both going to fall down and it's going to be miserable. And we've just seen that financially when we haven't been in sync. And so it's so much more beneficial for us to adjust our pace to whatever's going to work for both of us.
Yeah.
So Linda, how
and
do
there
you...
were certainly...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, since Bob is managing the finances, do you have a monthly meeting, or how do you stay involved enough to know what's going on?
Yeah, and so it has changed over the years. I'm much more involved now than I was before. But I think this is where you kind of have to know yourselves and be okay with where you're at. So, that's why we talk a lot about, like, not making your spouse feel guilty or ashamed of anything, and just kind of recognizing where you're at so that you can move forward. Because there were times when Bob would say, let's do this, we're going to do this. And the simple fact was that I just wasn't going to do it. So he could say, we're going to have a daily meeting about our budget. And I just would find a reason to not do it because I just couldn't. Mentally, I couldn't handle it. It would have really shut down our marriage in other ways. And so recognizing that that's okay, that he wanted to look at it every day, but it was also okay that I didn't. However, there was still a bridge that needed to be there, right? So I would go up to Bob and I would say, I want some extra money so I can XYZ. And he would say, great, come look at this with me and tell me where we're going to take it from. And that gave me ownership of being able to make decisions with him, instead of just always having to ask permission. Now, that sounds almost like I was asking permission because I was saying I wanted more money. But the thing is I knew we were on the same page enough for me to say, I can't just go spend this money. It needs to be a conversation first.
That's really good.
So I would go to Bob and say, this is what I want to do. And then he would, that's how he would kind of wrangle me in. Okay, let's go look at it together. And that was really helpful for the time when I was, real reluctant to look at everything that was going on. Because honestly, it just stressed me out to the point where I don't think I could have helped us move forward. That's why I had to take a step back and kind of let him lead.
I love that. Anything you want to add, Bob? That's super helpful.
I think being whoever, is leading the charge in that, I think it's really important to understand that, done is better than perfect. And so there, as we kind of built out our budget, I had the perfect budget built out because I'm really good at this, but again, like, I married to Linda and she's a wonderful wife, but we're just very different with this. And so I can either be upset that my perfect budget, or my wife is destroying my perfect budget because she can't stick with it, or I can just adapt it down to something, if that means whatever, adding more to the spending money account or towards vacation fund or whatever, so that she's on board and so that she's bought in and so that we can still make momentum forward. Again, coming back to that three-legged race analogy,
yeah.
like it works so much better. So it's important if you are that leader who is building the budget and whatever, to realize that you just might need to slow down the pace just a little bit in order to get it actually done.
And this is what I say I love about you guys, because I feel like that's such a unique and individual perspective. Years ago, I knew a guy who had his eyes fixed on the finish line, mortgage paid off by age 40, and he was fierce about it. But over the years, you saw his wife, the light go out of her eyes. So he was disconnected from his kids because he was working all these extra jobs. Well, he did indeed reach the goal, paid off his mortgage. Around that same year, his wife left. They ended up getting a divorce. He ended up buying a second house so that his wife and kids he could have a house in his wife and kids' neighborhood. So, so it's like, so you reached your initial goal at massive cost and casualty to so many other things. And that's what I loved on your podcast. You're saying you got to adjust your pace because you're building a life here. You're not just reaching goals.
Yeah. And Susie, one other thing here that I think is really important that is not talked about enough is that it is really easy, I would say, to make certain financial goals, or probably any financial goal. It can become an idol. And I don't think enough people talk about this, especially when it's a biblically based financial goal, like getting out of debt or something.
Right.
It's really easy. Like in that case, that's a perfect example of somebody, and I don't know his story, but presumably might have turned that into an idol at the sake of his marriage and kids and everything else. And that, to me, that doesn't sound like God's best.
Right.
And so I'm okay taking a slower ride, enjoying my life on the journey, and doing it that way. I just like that path a lot better.
And think about, God's will for Linda doesn't contradict his will for you. So with the way that he wired her to need to move at a pace where she can have a little breathing room in life, whatever challenge that creates in you conforms you to the image of Christ if you allow it. You know what I mean? That's what I love
So
about
good.
the beauty of just holding the tension, of letting the Lord do his work in all of us. And it's more than one dimensional always, right?
Yeah, that's so good.
So just a couple minutes before our break here, but Linda, say a word, if you would, about how the celebrations helped you. On the other side of the break, we'll talk about the science behind celebrating, but talk about how just, marked celebrations impacted you on the long haul.
Sure. I mean, it was really great because, again, I was not looking at everything every day like Bob was. Bob was constantly tweaking and making sure we were on the right track and all that. All I really saw was how much closer are we to the next milestone, and
Why don't you go into specifics about that?
when those would happen, we would have a little celebration. And it was just that moment of, okay, we can spend a little bit of money. I joke, we would always only order water. And it was like, ooh, I'm going to get a soda tonight. This is
When we went out to dinner.
this is a real
All right,
treat.
You did explain what it was.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, we would go out to dinner. That was our preferred method of celebrations at that time, is we would go out to a nice dinner. We enjoyed getting nice food instead of just, fast food or, something quick. And so we would do that. And so it just felt like, okay, we can do this. We can go back into it and know that this is going to happen again. And each time we did, there was just a little bit of breathing room on the other side of it. And so even if that meant, sometimes we would just roll all of it up and continue to put it towards our debt. But sometimes it would mean I would get an extra $10 a month to spend on something fun. And that really helped me. Just knowing it's possible that there's some relief. And the more we do this, there's going to be more and more and more relief. And knowing that there is an end in sight and that we are moving towards something and that we're making progress and we are going to get there. And so it made the kind of the harder parts a little bit easier, knowing that there was something that we were reaching for. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I'm thinking of how many people have told me over the years where they just deny themselves. and they get to the point where they can't handle it anymore. And then they go take a loan out or second mortgage or, consolidate their loans so they can rack up because they want to make a purchase. Because it's like, I need to be good to myself, and then they regret it and it backfires so badly. So it's like a meal out with a soda, or something like that. Along the way, it relieves the pressure. And as you said, casts a fresh vision for we're gaining ground here. We're getting some breathing room. So, okay, on the other side of the break, Bob, let's talk about the surprising science behind celebrating small wins. Again, I'm referring to a podcast episode they did recently on their podcast, and we'll link that up in the show notes. We're taking a break, talking to Bob and Linda Lotich. We get them on every month to just bring a fresh faith perspective on finances. I'm just begging you to ask God to give you a vision for what's possible in and through your financial story. On the other side as well, Bob and Linda had our friends Jamie and Donna Winship on the show recently, and wow, the conversation they had. We're going to ask for a little bit of insight from that one as well. Great conversation up ahead. We'll be back in a moment. Thanks so much for tuning into Susie Larson Live. I love today's show so much. I love these guests so much. They join me once a month to talk about getting a fresh faith perspective on our finances. Bob and Linda Lotich join me. Again, I'll link up their amazing podcast on our show notes. Today, we're drawing also from their book, Simple Money, Rich Life, Achieve True Financial Freedom, Design a Life of Eternal Impact. And it really is so much about moving from that bracing for impact, living check to check, to really learning how to do the debt snowball, paying off debt, and not just there. You don't stop there, but you start sowing and giving generously. And generosity becomes a core value because it's a core value in God's heart. And it just, if generosity marked every Christian, I think a revival might break out because so many live in self-preservation and fear. And this is one of the reasons I love their message so much. So in your recent podcast episode, Bob, you explained the science behind celebrating small wins, why it's so important to have marked goals and to make sure that you celebrate.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to read a little section from an article from Psychology Today that I found to be fascinating just in terms of, because, we shared a little bit of our experience and what we observed from celebrating some of these small wins on our journey to pay off our debt, and how that did help us reach that goal. But it's really cool when science kind of backs that up. And so this is what it says. It says, recognizing small milestones builds self-esteem and confidence. It counteracts our brain's our natural negativity bias, which tends to focus more on failures than successes. So by celebrating small wins, we create a positive feedback loop that reinforces our efforts and keeps us motivated to continue working towards our larger goals. And so I just think that's so cool. And there was another study that was done, I think it was a Harvard school, like 12,000 entries from employees at various companies. And they noticed this same pattern where tracking small achievements, like on a daily basis, significantly boosted motivation and fostered a sense of progress. And so there's something about the dopamine that's released when we do that. And then as that's released, that just makes us want to do it more. And so that's how we just keep that momentum going and be able to run a long race, like a marathon or something, as a metaphor here. And when I look back at our story, that's what it was. And again, even though I might have been someone who could have pushed through to make it to the finish line, it's just much more enjoyable, to go at a slightly slower pace and to hit the milestones and to celebrate and give each other high fives along the way, Mm-hmm.
Linda, I think this was your words in the book. I found the biggest breakthroughs when I remember that my job is to take natural steps, which usually then gets me out of God's way. So he has room to do the supernatural. When we do our part, we see how big the mountain is, how impossible it is to scale without his help, which makes it clear who really deserves all the glory. And you can tell me if you prefer not to answer this question or not, because I know you guys are, you're so wise in the way you steward your story. But as you started to sow generously, and God he put an audacious goal in your hearts as young people to give away your first $1 million and not to stop there, but you started to sow. And there are times you were sowing in ways that really cost you. I remember one of my favorite stories, Bob, that you tell is when you were out in a field praying and walking And I think you were tithing 11% at that time. And the Lord said, I want you to tithe your age. And you were 31. So you jumped up 20 points. And that was pretty significant. And that also, oh my goodness, is part of the story. You were praying actually and wrestling with God about how to pay off your mortgage quicker. And when he gave you that word, just doing the quick math, you're like, this will take me 10 years. So tell us that story, just because I want people to get a view, a vision of how God is when we do what he asks us to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and that's a gist of it. But like, once he asked me to do that, it wasn't, and this is what I think a lot of people think with giving, is that God is like, he needs our money. He's out to get it from us. And it's like, and it just wasn't anything like that. It was an invitation. It felt like, I mean, I often explain it like Jesus talking to Peter when Jesus is on the water and Peter's in the boat and say, hey, you want to come on out? And like, I can just see Jesus. Like I can picture that scene in my mind, and just Jesus's invitation to him, or really to all of them in the boat, like, come on out. Like, I got something really amazing here. You can be the one guy who's walking on water. Like, you can be the one guy who has that story. And so I just sensed that, this invitation to give way more than we thought. And really in that, again, back to that idea of making a financial goal an idol, which I had done, paying off a mortgage was that thing for me, to where nothing else mattered. That was the main thing. And then I kind of justified it by, well, yeah, God wants me to be out of debt. So it's like, and then God wanted to test my heart. And so he said, well, what happens if I just ask you to basically triple the amount you're giving, And so it was a challenge for me. It was like difficult laying that down in this thing that I had been chasing after for so many years, and to say, all right, God, I'm going to obey you and give all of our money away so we have nothing to put towards our mortgage anymore, And
no attitude there. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's just so beautiful how he came through. And so the rest of the story is we started doing that, and it was less than a year later, we had a paid off mortgage, and it was just such a beautiful the grace of God to just show up in such a way and to reward, at that point,
obedience.
I've had plenty failures in terms of obedience, but that particular one we did, and the fruit of it was just so beautiful, and we'll never forget it.
What did it do for your heart, Linda, when, so God called him to do this and you were on board with that, really believing this is from the Lord? But you also, that meant you were postponing this goal. And if you just did the math, it would take 10 years to pay off the mortgage. And in the days, weeks, months ahead, God started to surprise you. Like, what did that do in your heart and for your heart?
It helped me to realize where I should be putting my trust.
Great.
And with trust, we have to sometimes purposefully take it out of one thing and put it in a different place. The idea of doing a trust fall where you just fall backwards. In your head, you're like, it's okay, they're going to catch me. But your body is saying, no, they won't. You're going to fall to the ground, and you really have to work hard to say, but no, I'm not. There's someone there that is watching and waiting and will catch me. And, I think that it can be like that with money a lot of times, where our heads can be saying, no, it's okay, God will do it. But it really has to transfer down into our entire being of God is there. God is bigger. God is the provider. And so every time we walked through one of those things, that's what it did a little bit more and more and more, to where it was like when God asks us to do something, it's a lot easier to say yes every single time because you've seen his track record, which is totally faithful,
That's so good. Oh, thank you for that. On the podcast, the one about the surprising science behind celebrating wins, you gave some very practical steps. So I'll kind of cue you up, Bob, and then Linda, if you want to piggyback on any of these points, please go ahead. But there's 5 points, and if you got a notepad, friends, take notes because these are really great. First one is track your progress. And you even offered info because you have so many helpful downloads on your website. You talked about a debt snowball sheet, but start with tracking your progress. And if you want to add in any info on the debt snowball sheet, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So just this idea of actually paying attention and tracking, it gives you a way to mark down certain points to celebrate. And so in our case, we were paying off a bunch of debt when we first got married, student loans, credit cards, car loans, all that stuff. And so we had it all on this sheet and, had probably 10 or 15 different debts listed that we were paying off. And we used the debt snowball approach. It's scientifically proven to be the most effective. And so we just went with that. Anyway, and so having something to track that rather than just having the mess of our finances, and it's like, well, I don't, hopefully it'll get paid off, it was just the best way to do it. And so, like you mentioned, we found an Excel nerd who really way nerdier than me to build a really great spreadsheet on this. So we do have that available that give a free if anybody wants it. It's just seedtime.com/snowball, and you can go get a copy of it there if you want.
And so that's one of the ways to
that's
keep
the
your
gist of
eyes
it.
on what's happening, right? And I would imagine that's super helpful for the person maybe not doing the finances because they can at least track progress with you, right?
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. It's just that, I'd walk over to the computer and Bob would say, look at this. And he'd show me, it was a real quick way of seeing we've paid off these 3 credit cards in, a certain amount of, whatever the time frame was. He'd tell me how long. And I'd be like, oh, okay. So we're moving forward. And then I'd be like, all right, what's the next one? And it really helped us stay focused.
So good. Okay, so track your progress. And again, if you want to check out the Debt Snowball sheet, it's seedtime.com/ is it Debt Snowball?
Just snowball.
Snowball. Seedtime.com/snowball. Second one is set your milestones. So kind of define when and where and how you're going to celebrate what are the celebration markers, so to speak. Go ahead and speak to that one.
Yeah. And so in our case, that's, again, it was pretty easy for us because we had all these credit cards. And so we just basically, each time we paid one off, we'd celebrate. And again, for people listening, this can be hard for the numbers nerds because you're like, well, that's a big step back to go have $100 fancy dinner when you're trying to pay off this credit card. And it was, but again, that step back was what allowed us to continue to make it all the way to the finish line. And so whatever your financial goal is, even if it's not broken into natural chunks like that, even if it is something significant like saving a down payment for a house or something like that, it would still be beneficial. We found for most people to break that out into certain chunks. And so maybe if it's you save 2%, and then once you save 5%, and once you save 10%, mark those down, make those points to celebrate.
And then you say, celebrate immediately. So you talked about going to dinner. What are some other creative ways that you go, okay, we hit a landmark. Let's celebrate.
I don't know. What else do we do? Anything?
I mean, this is all based, I think, off of your personality and what is motivating to you. I mean, Bob and I even still do things like this where we will set quarterly goals for ourselves. And then we will say, if I do this, this, and this by this certain date, then I am going to buy myself whatever it is. I really love Blair Ritchie handbags. And so that has been one of my things. Bob has you've got all kinds of stuff for the garden that you want to buy. I mean, it's like we just say, this is what I want. And I would never buy this for myself normally. So that's going to be the celebration. Does that make sense? But it can really be anything. I mean, for, paying off our house, we had, some celebrations for that were bigger. But in the very beginning, it was like we could really only afford a nice dinner out. That was like the top of our range at that point. So it just depends on where you are, what you're willing to spend, and then, your personality.
Yeah, I appreciated, Bob, what you said on the podcast. Let's say you paid off a $40 bill and then you went and spent $200 to celebrate. That's not the idea. Exactly.
Exactly.
It set some markers.
Common sense should prevail. Yeah.
Come on. Yes. Quarterly. Okay. I'm going to read these other 2 practical steps because I want to pivot on the other side. We just have a few minutes left. Talk about your conversation with Jamie Winship, and also want to tie that with generosity and just growing in the grace of giving. Just some practical steps for friends who maybe are terrified of starting to sow and give, what that might look like. So I'll give you these. So again, the 5 practical steps: track your progress. And we linked up the debt snowball sheet in our notes, so we will. Set your milestones. So define your celebration markers, celebrate immediately. And then the 4th is really take a moment, actually soak it up, enjoy achievement, reflect on how far you've come, how far God's brought you. And one of the questions Bob says to ask yourself is, where would I be if I wouldn't have done this? If I wouldn't have applied myself to paying off this debt, where would I be right now? Like this, like you're kind of pondering and standing in awe of, this was work and it was worth it. And the final one is share your success. Don't do this alone. It kind of circles back to how we began this show, that there will be times when God calls you to testify because it'll encourage someone else. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about their conversation recently with Jamie and Donna Winship and just some practical steps on moving forward in the grace of giving. Bob and Linda Lotich are my guests. We'll be back in a minute. You know, one of the greatest barriers to thriving in life, one of the greatest barriers to an intimate walk with God, is unforgiveness. It blocks our view of the sun. It keeps us from hearing God's voice. It ties us up in knots and holds us captive. It's hard, but we're called to it, to forgive. People are going to hurt us, but God misses nothing. When it comes to your story and your life, He's indifferent about nothing. And one day, He'll make all things right. So by forgiving doesn't mean what they did is okay. By forgiving, it means you're rolling your burden onto the shoulders of the Lord, who can actually do something about it. And it frees you up to live free, pure, healed, and whole. If you need some help with forgiving, you can text the word forgive to 877-933-2484. You'll receive a series of text messages featuring audio clips of interviews from our shows, Mornings with Carmen, my show, Susie Larson Live, and my friend Bill Arnold, Afternoons with Bill. These texts will highlight past shows, Bible verses, and encouraging words and prayers to help you move forward in your journey of forgiveness. Don't miss it, friend. Forgiveness will help set you free. Text the word forgive today to 877-933-2484. Thanks so much for tuning into Susie Larson Live, having a great conversation with our friends Bob and Linda Lotich, who join us every month to get a faith perspective on finances. And we just have a few minutes left. And Bob, when you and Linda got to interview Jamie and Donna Winship, who again are dear friends of our show as well, we love them so much. You set it up with an amazing question about solving world hunger. Say what you said, and just give us a little highlight of that conversation with Jamie.
Yeah. So long story short, we did a little bit of research because we're trying to figure out organizationally what is the thing that we want to do, that we want to spend our lives doing. And so we did a quick research, and we determined, we realized that the UN said that $40 billion per year is all that is needed in theory, to end world hunger. We know there's obviously more to it than just money, but point is $40 billion a year, they say, will end world hunger. You break that out by the number of Christian households, not Christians, but Christian households in the United States. And you divide that, and it comes up to each household giving an extra $480 per year, which is less than 1% of the average household income. So what that means to me is all we need to do is get Christians in America, each household, to increase their giving by 1% per year. And then we have all the funds needed to solve world hunger. And so when I realized that, I'm like, that it was exciting to me, because it's like, this is not that big of a challenge. Like it's a big problem that is not that far out of reach. Like 1% is not painful. You know what I mean? Most people would never even feel it. So I posed this question to Jamie, and I said, this is what we determined, or what we've kind of done some research on and found. And my question to him really was, or my observation of Christians I've talked to over the last 15 years about money, is the thing that holds most Christians back. It's not greed. It's not that I really want that 1%. It's that I'm afraid to give that extra 1%.
Yep.
And so I was just asking him, like, what do you think? Like, how do Christians overcome this fear in their finances? And like, what is causing this, you know? And and a really great conversation ensued, I think.
Yeah, and you'll have to listen to it because it was fantastic. But I remember a few shows ago, Bob, I asked you to share your guidelines, yours and Linda's guidelines for giving, like who and what you give to. And you had two guidelines. I don't remember what they were, but I remember loving them. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you share those?
Sure. Yeah. We like to give from a grateful heart and give from a broken heart. And so we look for those things that we are grateful for. And this was something we heard from a pastor years ago. We look for those things that we are grateful for, the organizations we're grateful for, the people that we're grateful for, and we want to sow into them. We want them to continue to exist. We want to show our appreciation, all those different things. But at the same time, we look for things that, what are the things that break our heart? What are the things that we wish, were different? And how can we use our wallets? How can we use our money, a resource God's entrusted to us, to help solve and alleviate those problems? And so that has been a good framework for us to identify people and organizations and situations that we want to give into.
Linda, we just got about a minute left. And how do you reassess that each year when new needs arise? Or how do you guys grow in the grace of giving and constantly kind of assess as you move forward?
Sure. I think if something strikes us, then we have a little conversation about it. We found out about something a few years ago, and I literally was bawling my eyes out, like wondering how the person telling the story and talking about it could even finish their sentence. And so that struck me as, this is something that breaks my heart, and it's probably breaking the heart of God too. So whenever things like that happen, or we just hear of an opportunity, we'll just have a little chat of like, can we work this in? Because it really seems to be something that is striking a nerve, and therefore it feels like a calling rather than just like something to be upset about. Does that make sense?
Oh, so much. And just got about 30 seconds left, Bob. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that's not the only way we give, and it's like we try not to give just based on
out of compulsion.
Yeah, but I think that's really important, to be paying attention to what are those things that God puts on your heart, and not to just ignore them and hope that they go away, but to use your resource to help be an answer to that problem.
Appreciate you guys. I'm going to read this excerpt from your book. God is bigger than any financial problems we face, but we have to be willing to step out in faith and see the miracle. Oftentimes, that step of faith is a natural step that allows God to do the supernatural. When we take the natural step while prayerfully asking God to do the supernatural, we open the door for the miraculous. And I want us to live miraculous lives. Bob and Linda, I know you're busy. Thank you for giving us time, and I'm praying God will redeem that time for you. Super great conversation today.
We loved it. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. And thank you for tuning in. I pray you found some encouragement here today. Every step towards health, healing, wholeness matters. Every step towards financial stewardship matters. If you're someone who's never, ever given a gift or sown into ministry, find one you're grateful for. Find one for a cause that breaks your heart. Give $10. Just start sowing seeds and see what happens. We love you and appreciate you. We'll meet you back here next time. Thank you for listening to this conversation from Susie Larson Live. These conversations are available because of your support. You can become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and then share it with friends so together we can all have a deeper life in Christ.
On the latest episode of the Wow God Stories podcast, we go to Africa.
I was raised in Sierra Leone in a community that truly lived the phrase, "It takes a village."
Until one day, the world outside Anita's village broke in.
I didn't grow up in a war zone, but I watched one unfold in the country I love.
God brought hope to her story and many others through radical provision.
God began to direct us towards Uganda, Africa.
I was born and grew up in the countryside of Ethiopia.
Nanjan I met in Kigali, Rwanda.
Discover how God showed up in the middle of war, loss, and impossible odds in Africa. Stories that'll make you say,
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God Stories. Wherever you get your podcasts.